thought it was crazy, honestly. I was like, this is actually kind of entertaining, kind of weird, kind of quirky, but also really cool.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
All right, folks, I got a crazy one for you today. As you know, I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole deep when it comes to AI. Not only learning about it, but also teaching about it. By the way, I've got an interesting event coming up that I want to tell you about at the end of the show. But today is going to be a different type of podcast. I'll tell you more in a bit, but first, I want to remind you that we're sponsored by a couple of great companies. One of them being OREP Insurance. OREP is found at orep.org, and it, of course, is the E&O that I use. And then we are sponsored by TrueTrax, Synapse, and Spark. Why all three? Hang tight, and I'll tell you. Right now, you can find out more by going to truefootage.tech. That's truefootage.tech. Okay, folks, for many years, I have been encouraging appraisers to use technology to their advantage. The three-legged stool to success when it comes to small business is number one, technology, number two, human resources, and number three, the systems to put that all together. Today's podcast actually has to do with all three, but mostly focused on technology and specifically on AI. I have been learning a lot about something that kind of seemed like a gimmick to me up front. It was fun, it was quirky, it was kind of impressive, but it wasn't really usable until I really got into it, and that was Notebook LM. Notebook LM is a product produced by Google. And by the way, if you are a Gemini user, you have access to Notebook LM, and basically that's a Google One account. I already had a Google One account, but I just upgraded to the AI account, and that gave me access to Gemini. It gave me access to the Notebook LM, as I mentioned, and gave me access to all kinds of tools inside the Google system that I've been using for years and years and years. And as I got into Notebook LM, one of the quirky little things, and I'm going to share this with you, and I'm going to save the good part for last, okay? So what I want to do is showcase for you one of the things that Notebook LM will do. This was first actually taught to me with my good friend Blaine Fyan. He and I were talking months ago, and he said, check this out. He said, go to Notebook LM and put in an appraisal. Just upload an appraisal and then hit podcast or generate audio. What it did is it created a two-person podcast where they talked about an appraisal. I thought it was crazy, honestly. I was like, this is actually kind of entertaining, kind of weird, kind of quirky, but also really cool. It made something as boring as an appraisal come to life. But honestly, it kind of stopped there. I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Well, folks, fast forward, we did our retreat, our Elevate retreat in California, and good friend Roy Meyer came and said, and this was interesting to me. He taught us a lot about AI, but he said if there was any tool that you should be exploring right now, and I thought he was going to say ChatGPT. He said, it's Notebook LM. And I went, what? That quirky little thing that makes podcasts? Really? Anyway, as we got down and discussed more depth, it made sense to me why I should explore Notebook LM. I immediately went home, subscribed, and have spent a lot of hours in Notebook LM at this point. I would call Notebook LM I call ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, Claude, all of these large language models. You've heard that phrase before, LLMs, not MLMs, LLMs, large language models. I call Notebook LM, and this is just my own, I think, maybe it is a phrase out there, but I think I coined this phrase. I call it small language model because it's basically only riffs off of what you put into it. Okay, do you see where I'm going with this and see why it's so powerful? It's not going to go out to the internet and search, right? It will if you ask it to. There is a way around that, but that's not the default. That's not the purpose. In fact, that's what separates it from every other AI out there. This is just your stuff. Okay. So to set this up, I want to share with you, what I created. So basically, I took every one of my podcasts ever created, and I created a transcript for them. Okay. So over 1,000 episodes, written transcript for everyone. Every meeting that I have a monthly meeting with the coach that we record. So it's kind of a webinar on something that can help your business. And we do that with the All-Star team every single month, and I've been doing it for years. All of those meetings uploaded to Notebook LM. Every blog I've ever written uploaded to Notebook LM. I put out a newsletter, and I have been for years and years and years, every month, with deep information about products and services and marketing and how to better, more efficiently run your office, and some inspirational stuff in there as well. Every single month, I put together a notebook. All of that, I put it in Notebook LM. All of my standard operating procedures for the Appraiser Coach, I put in Notebook LM. Okay, and I called this notebook the Appraiser Coach. Once everything was in there, I hit the generate button, and about 15 minutes later, I had a podcast. Okay, so this podcast that I'm going to share it with you. This podcast that you're about to hear is completely AI generated, 100%. I gave it no direction at all. I hit one button. It looked at all of the information in the Appraiser Coach, and then it created a podcast, a 2-person podcast, male and female. You'll hear them. Obviously, the voices are AI generated. Okay, they're not real people, and they talk about the content inside the Appraiser Coach. Okay. Now, I would say it's about 95% accurate, meaning it's not inaccurate in the sense that the hosts talk about what I've done for the last 15 years as an appraiser coach, right? But sometimes it puts together things a little bit weird. So I'm listening to it, I'm like, I mean, yeah, I see where you got that from, but I wouldn't have talked about that, number one, and I definitely would have talked about it that way. You'll see what I mean. Okay. So sit back, grab your popcorn, grab your soda. Enjoy this. This is a podcast completely generated by AI with Google Notebook LM. Here we go.
Have you ever looked into the world of real estate and wondered, well, what really makes a home valuable? Or maybe how the whole field of appraisal, which, let's face it, affects all of us buying, selling, even just being curious how it keeps reinventing itself. Today, we're diving deep. We've got a fantastic collection of sources here, covering everything from the nitty-gritty of running an appraisal business to the latest tech and what's considered best practice. Our mission, really, is simple. Boil all this complex stuff down into insights you can actually use. Maybe some surprising facts, too. Basically, a shortcut to feeling well-informed about appraisals, from office strategy right down to decisions made standing in a property.
And that's exactly where the value lies, I think. Understanding these dynamics inside the profession, how appraisers run their shops, how they're grappling with new tech, the ethical tightropes they walk, it gives you critical context. Doesn't matter if you're in real estate, focused on business efficiency, or just interested in how data gets used in the real world. We're not just going to tick off what they do. We're digging into the why. Why do certain practices matter? We want you thinking critically about maybe some assumptions you hold.
Right. So if you want your business to thrive, really thrive doesn't matter if you're an appraiser or in, frankly, any service industry. It often starts with getting your own house in order, right? For appraisers, that means taking a hard look at how the office is structured, which brings us neatly to our first big topic, optimizing the appraisal business, efficiency, growth, support systems. And it seems to kick off with this idea of an appraiser office staffing model, a tiered responsibility approach.
Precisely. Yeah, this tiered model is potentially a game changer for efficiency. Think about it in 3 distinct levels, sort of like layers. Tier 1, that's your really basic repetitive stuff. Answering phones, handling emails, data entry, taking notes. The real genius here isn't just saving a bit of money on salary. It's about strategically reclaiming the appraiser's most valuable asset, their analytical time. This is work that, is pretty straightforward. Give someone with a good work ethic maybe 2 weeks of training, and frankly, almost anybody with a brain and a pulse, as they say, could handle it well. Okay, tier 2. This steps it up. It's more appraiser-centric, more professional, more technical. We're talking about understanding complex things like plat maps, aerial maps, crunching some preliminary numbers, sketching properties accurately. Interestingly, even property inspections often fall into tier 2. It's really skilled data gathering, not the final analysis, even though, sometimes tier 3 folks do it. Someone who's been in an appraisal office for, say, 6 months, they could definitely start dipping their toes into these tasks. And then tier 3, that's the analysis side.
The core, appraiser side of things. This is where the real valuation work happens, the critical thinking, the professional judgment. And importantly, trainees can do tier 3 work. Absolutely, provided they're properly trained and crucially trusted and supervised.
Okay, so for any business owner listening, understanding this kind of structure, it really shows how you can transform your own approach to delegation, right? And efficiency. It doesn't matter the industry. By strategically offloading the routine stuff, you're not just delegating tasks away. You're fundamentally shifting your focus to the high-value, complex problems that actually drive revenue and maybe prevent burnout too. Okay, so we've got this smart internal structure for efficiency. But what happens when, the outside world throws a curveball, like that 2008 housing crash? That totally reshaped real estate. I know many people remember that time vividly, though. Apparently, it hit places like Idaho a bit later, closer to 2010.
That's a critical point. Yeah, the timing varied. And yes, adapting is key. I know of one appraiser, for instance, who completely re-innovated their business model after 2010, and perhaps surprisingly, ended up earning more net income than before the crash. How? By really skillfully adjusting to those huge market shifts, like the big move from direct lending relationships to working primarily through appraisal management companies, the AMCs, the core belief driving that success, this idea that optimism and proactive activity, not just hunkering down, can lead you to thrive, not just survive, even through massive change and uncertainty.
Yeah, what I find really interesting there is that idea of constant reevaluation, seeing opportunity even when things look, turbulent. It's about having that forward momentum, that willingness to find what really works for your business now, not just sticking to what worked 5 years ago. And speaking of thriving, let's talk about mastermind groups. You hear these stories, right? Legends like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, even Jack Canfield crediting these groups for a lot of their success. But, for a field like appraisal, which is so regulated and specialized, are there unique challenges or maybe even bigger benefits to sharing strategies this way?
That's a great question. Mastermind groups, typically, maybe 3 to 12 people. They meet online or in person. The whole point is shared goals, motivation, and tackling specific business problems together. What's really fascinating, though, is that even if the members are from totally different fields, maybe an insurance agent, a pizza shop owner, a financial planner, the core principles of running a good business and achieving individual success, they're surprisingly universal. The benefits can be huge. You get these invaluable outside perspectives you just wouldn't get otherwise. You solve pressing problems way faster because you've got multiple brains on it. And you often gain a much clearer vision for where your business could go for future growth. We've actually seen appraisers in groups like this go from, say, a one-person shop grossing maybe $85,000 a year to running businesses doing $600,000, $800,000 a year, sometimes in just a couple of years. It really creates this sort of appraisal family vibe. And it's not just face-to-face. There are online groups too, appraisal-specific ones like the All-Star Team Forum, that act as this really supportive community. People share practical solutions for unusual situations, not just, complaining about problems.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, something else in business. It's easy to fall into that trap of the traditional open door policy. It sounds great, doesn't it? Welcoming, accessible. But often, in reality, it can lead to huge inefficiencies, constant interruptions for the business owner trying to focus.
You're absolutely right. That's where strategic staff meetings can be a really powerful alternative. But the key is these meetings can't just be for the sake of having a meeting. They need structure. They need purpose. They need to be an outlet for employees to bring up grievances, questions, concerns, sure, but also suggestions, goals. Using something like a round-robin approach ensures everyone gets a chance to speak, which is important. But the absolute non-negotiable part, you have to write down action items, concrete takeaways, who's doing what by when. Without that, meetings are, frankly, often a waste of everyone's valuable time.
So thinking about that for your own business operations, are your conversations, your meetings actually leading to concrete, actionable steps, or just more talk? We're always chasing efficiency, aren't we? Getting more done. But sometimes the best way to achieve that is, to actually do less. for a bit. I remember hearing about H. Miller, this veteran entrepreneur. He was totally overwhelmed, just chained to his desk, felt like he couldn't step away. A mentor told him, H, you need to slough off an afternoon, go play golf. He was really hesitant, felt guilty even thinking about it, but he did it. And the result, it was remarkable. He didn't just feel refreshed. His focus, his productivity when he got back, dramatically higher. It totally reset his perspective on work.
That anecdote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It connects right back to the core reason so many people go into business for themselves in the first place. They want to be in charge, not feel like the business is running them. And that leads to maybe a broader definition of wealth, not just money, but to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, because I want. That's about freedom, isn't it? Liberty, creating the space for creativity to actually, fertilize and grow. It impacts your whole life, not just your work hours.
Yeah, it really challenges you, the listener, to think about your own why. How does your business or your work truly serve your personal vision of wealth beyond just the P&L statement? Okay, shifting gears a bit. In today's world, just, existing as a business isn't enough. Being known is critical. And think about it, where does everyone go first when looking for services like appraisal? Google.
Absolutely. So building an effective online presence, your website has got to be more than just an info site, more than just like an online flyer. Google actually prioritizes sites that have constant, relevant updates. Ideally, that means an active blog or maybe even a vlog, updated at least monthly. Fresh content matters. And having a Google business page is also critical, non-negotiable really. And it needs to be linked to a real physical address, not a P.O. box, not a virtual office. That's essential for showing up in local map searches, getting that local visibility. Client reviews are also incredibly important these days. But here's the thing. Clients usually don't leave reviews unless you ask them to. Or, unfortunately, they only do it when they've had a bad experience. So you have to be proactive. Actively solicit reviews during or right after an appointment. Sending a quick text link can work really well. Yeah, Google says it prefers organic reviews, but let's be real. You have to ask to build that reputation consistently. Also, maybe consider hiring an SEO expert, even just temporarily, every few years. It can give you a real leg up, especially since your competition is likely doing nothing systematic to boost their online visibility.
All right, folks, do you see what I'm talking about? We're not done yet. We're going to come back here in just a little bit. I just wanted to take a break and just talk briefly about our sponsors. I mentioned up front 3 sponsors. Usually I talk about them separately: TrueTracks, Synapse, Spark for appraisers, right? But if you go to sparkforappraisers.com right now, what you'll find is a login, okay? So that's for people that have an account. If you want to learn more about any of these tools, either TrueTracks, Synapse, or Spark, they have combined all of these great tools into one website. It is at truefootage.tech/tools. Folks, truefootage.tech/tools. One more time, truefootage.tech/tools. And of course, we're sponsored by OREP Insurance. OREP is my E&O of choice. That's right. My E&O of choice because of what it can do, because of how great it is for appraisers. They understand appraisers. They shop it around. They give me the best price and the best benefits. They will you as well. That's OREP Insurance at OREP.org. All right, folks, welcome back. We're going to finish off the podcast, and then I want to talk a little bit about why I share this with you. And it's not just for entertainment purposes. Please stay tuned. I know this podcast is going to last a little bit longer than most of my podcasts, okay? But stay tuned because I promise there's some gold at the end of the tunnel here. Let's finish off the podcast that was created by Google through Notebook LM.
Okay, let's shift gears again. Let's dive into some of the critical nuances of actual appraisal practice, starting with a pretty delicate topic: appraiser bias and making sure reporting is accurate. You sometimes hear about bias, like maybe valuing properties at the top end of the range in a flat market just to keep a client happy, which understandably can attract unwanted attention from state appraisal boards.
Right. And that phrase you see in appraisal certifications, true and correct, that really highlights the appraiser's analytical objective role, which is why that common phrase, the appraisal came in low, is actually quite problematic and inaccurate. An appraiser has zero motivation or shouldn't have to deliberately come in lower than a purchase price. The goal is just accuracy, unvarnished market value. Using terms like came in low wrongly implies that the appraiser somehow screwed things up rather than acknowledging they provided a precise, impartial valuation based on the data.
Yeah, it's all about that precision, isn't it? Not about being labeled conservative or liberal with the value. The goal is simply to be accurate, reflect the market as it actually is.
That actually reminds me of a story I heard from an appraiser working way out in rural Idaho. He had this absolute ironclad rule for inspections. Always, always announce yourself, loudly, repeatedly, even if the property is listed as vacant. Because, as he apparently put it, in some parts of Idaho, people don't wait for the police at night.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what are those non-negotiable safety rules appraisers really need to live by on every single inspection?
That story really underscores a vital point. Safety first, always. The recommended procedures are pretty clear. Always knock loudly multiple times, ring the bell repeatedly, and yes, yell something like "Appraiser, anybody home, appraiser coming in the house," as you enter. Even if dispatch or the office said it's vacant, you have to clearly announce your presence. Avoid dangerous surprises. That comes from, decades of experience seeing unexpected situations. And naturally, you exercise even more caution when inspecting houses that are clearly lived in. And there's a very specific rule I've heard about avoiding photos of children, even accidentally in the background. Why is that so strict?
It's absolutely a strict rule, and for critical reasons.
Ah.
Taking photos of children, even if completely unintentional, just opens up a huge can of worms. Privacy issues, legal liabilities, ethical concerns. It's about safeguarding the appraiser's professionalism, preventing any misinterpretation of why they're taking pictures, and above all, ensuring the absolute safety and privacy of the kids and the appraisers. In today's world, images can be misused so easily it's just not worth the risk.
Okay, let's tackle common questions, something appraisers often grapple with. What exactly counts as significant assistance, and how do you disclose that properly, especially if non-appraisers are involved? This can get a bit murky with U.S. PAPE, right? That's the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, basically the rule book for appraisers.
Right, U.S. PAP Standard 2, and specifically FAQ 2525, gives some clarity here. It says only appraisers who provide significant appraisal assistance need to be named in the actual certification page of the report. Now, if a non-licensed person, maybe an ex-appraiser whose license lapsed, an unlicensed trainee or some other expert provides what we call Tier 3 appraisal type stuff. Things like doing market studies, pulling and analyzing comps, making adjustments, reconciliation work, anything requiring analysis. Their names and exactly what they did should be stated somewhere in the report, maybe in an addendum or a specific section, but not in the certification itself. Critically, the legal liability for the entire appraisal, that stays squarely with the appraiser who signs the report. It's important to distinguish that analytical work from just, say, data gathering, like someone doing a drive-by, taking photos, noting observations. A non-appraiser can do that without needing to be named. Interestingly, Fannie Mae actually allows unlicensed or uncertified folks or trainees to do significant appraisal work as long as they're supervised by a licensed appraiser and state law allows it. The key takeaway for anyone working with appraisers, or maybe thinking about the field, is understanding that clear line of responsibility. It protects the process, ensures accountability.
Got it. Now, let's define a term that gets thrown around a lot, but maybe isn't always fully understood. Arm's length transaction. What does that actually mean?
Okay, to put it clearly, an arm's length transaction requires two main things. First, there can't be any undue influence or pressure on either the seller or the buyer.
Oh.
Second, the parties have to arrive at that contract price through free and open negotiations. So, for example, think about a landlord selling a property to their long-term tenant. If those conditions are met, no pressure, open negotiation on price, then yes, despite the pre-existing relationship, that is considered an arm's length transaction. The relationship itself doesn't automatically disqualify it.
Okay, that clarification is helpful. This leads nicely into the concept of over-improvement for a specific area. Why isn't having the biggest home in the neighborhood always a good thing from a valuation standpoint?
Right, being the biggest or most elaborate isn't always best. Over-improvements can actually be problematic. For one, they often come with higher maintenance costs, bigger utility bills, things that don't necessarily add proportional market value. It ties directly into the economic principle of the law of diminishing returns, especially regarding square footage. That extra 500 square feet you add to an already large home, it often adds less value per square foot than the initial square footage did. The return diminishes. You see this with really unique properties too. There was an anecdote about a huge converted church in a small town, Dubois, Idaho. Its sheer size, while interesting, didn't translate into proportional market value in that specific location. Context matters.
Let's tackle something millions of people use, the Zillow's estimate. For many homeowners or buyers, it's the first place they look to get a sense of a home's value.
Ah, yes, the Zestimate. Well, Zillow itself puts some pretty important disclaimers out there about it. They state it's created by an automatic software process designed by statisticians, end quote. And crucially, they say there's no ability for humans to manually alter this estimate for a specific property. No overrides. But the most important line, quoting them directly, is, "It is not an appraisal. It is a starting point in determining a home's value." That disclaimer, one suspects, was likely added due to pressure, maybe even lawsuits, precisely to stop people confusing these automated estimates with official, human-conducted appraisals performed by licensed professionals.
That distinction is so important. It's a starting point, a rough guide maybe, but absolutely not the final word, like a formal appraisal. And one last specific, very practical question for appraisers dealing with contracts. There can be multiple dates on a purchase agreement. Which date do I choose for the contract date in my report?
Good question. Comes up a lot. The clear recommendation, and really the only legally sound one, is this. Choose the date of the most recent signature. Why? Simple logic. A contract isn't truly legal and binding until both parties, buyer and seller, have signed it and agreed to all terms. That final signature date is when it becomes a fully executed, enforceable agreement.
Okay, makes sense. Now let's look forward, our final section, the future of appraisal. And this immediately brings up a huge topic. Big data and artificial intelligence. There's definitely some fear out there, claims that AI will eventually just replace appraisers altogether.
It's true, there's apprehension. But the perspective I'm hearing from many forward-thinking appraisers is that AI is actually the biggest tool in business right now.
Yeah.
You could compare its potential impact to, say, Gutenberg's printing press revolutionized information, or how appraisal software itself changed the industry decades ago. It's a paradigm shift. And big data, that's not the future, it is already here. Think about how appraisers already use MLS systems that is a form of big data. The consensus seems to be that appraisers who learn to adapt, who incorporate big data and new technology like maybe advanced laser devices for measuring houses into their workflow, they will ultimately thrive. These tools can make the job more accurate, definitely faster, and importantly, not boring by handling the repetitive stuff. I actually had a chat with a software developer recently who works on appraisal tech, and he was adamant. Computers will never fully replace the appraiser because of that nuanced human judgment involved in complex situations.
That's a strong statement, and it really does highlight the unique value an experienced human brings. But what about the challenge of valuing unique features? Things AI struggles with, like, say, view value in places like Southern California. That's hard to quantify from standard data, isn't it?
Exactly. That's a perfect example of where the human element, combined with maybe some data science skills, really comes into play. It's where the appraiser's expertise truly shines. Sure, some MLS systems might have drop-down lists for views, ocean, forest, open space, but they're usually not ordered or sequenced in a way that allows for direct, apples-to-apples comparison and analysis. So appraisers increasingly need to learn more scientific methods to essentially improve, verify, confirm, enhance, and rate that kind of qualitative data objectively. The bottom line is, either appraisers will step up and learn data science principles to master these nuances, or frankly, some other profession will pick it up and do it.
This also touches on a somewhat controversial perspective floating around in the industry. Is providing just one single pinpoint number for a property's value, actually?
Well, the source used the word stupid.
Yeah, it's a provocative take. The argument behind it is that markets are dynamic, they fluctuate. So appraisers should perhaps be looking at providing a market value range, like, say, this property is likely worth between $580,000 and $602,000, rather than trying to nail one exact number. A range, the argument goes, gives a more realistic picture of market conditions and inherent uncertainty. However, it's also true that banks and lenders, for their purposes, often strongly prefer that single point value. It simplifies their decision-making process, so there's a tension there. Wow, what a comprehensive journey. We've really explored how a strategic approach to managing the business itself, a deep commitment to ethical conduct and safety on the job, and critically, an enthusiastic embrace of technology are all just essential for success in the appraisal world today.
Indeed. And maybe a final thought to leave with you, the listener. Given this constant churn of technology and data, especially in real estate, how might you, no matter what your profession is, how might you apply these principles we've talked about, adaptability, strategic learning, embracing change to your own life, your own business, so you don't just survive what's coming, but actually find ways to truly thrive in this ever-changing landscape?
That's a powerful question to ponder. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of appraisal. We hope you'll continue your own deep dive into knowledge.
All right, folks, there it is. Isn't that interesting? Again, I've promised you some gold at the end. I promise you I'm going to give you some gold here. Okay. Now, I want to recap and remind you, right, that everything you just heard came from a small language model, my notebook LM of the Appraiser Coach. Everything that I've ever done, right, everything that I've ever said and written about, I threw into Notebook LM and it becomes a database of everything. Okay. Now, all I did was hit the audio button. It generated a podcast and it basically picked and chose probably the stuff I talk about most, that I've talked about over and over again, or, I don't know how it deciphers. AI does what AI does, right? It's fun. It's entertaining. I would encourage any of you, you don't need to have an account, by the way. You can use Notebook LM for free. Upload any boring doc. It's an appraisal, your company website, whatever you want to do. Upload it to Notebook LM, hit generate, and just see what it does with the podcasting. It's just fun, okay? But that's not why I shared this with you. As we wrap up today, I want to share with you why I use Notebook LM and why I took the time to download all of that data that I talked about and put it in Notebook LM and call it the Appraiser Coach. I actually have 5 notebooks right now, okay? In Notebook LM, I've got 5 different notebooks, and see if this makes sense to you. One of them is called the Appraiser Coach, obviously. The other one is called Peak Value Appraisals. Okay, that's my appraisal company. The other one is named after my Airbnbs. The other one is named Goats of Glacier, which is the family farm that we run up in Montana. And the other one is called Elevate Retreat. Okay, so for the retreat that we do and will continue to do moving forward. So every one of my companies has its own Notebook LM. Do you see where I'm going with this? Folks, this becomes your standard operating procedures, your procedural notebook. Speaking of Google, for years I've taught people to use Google Sites, SITES, for their procedural manual. First of all, have a procedural manual. Second of all, have it online. Make sure it's digital. Number 3, use something that's free. Google Sites was free, okay? But now we have Notebook LM. Now, there's a free version of Notebook LM, but if you're really going to use this as a robust SOP, folks, I would encourage that you pay for it. It's like $20 a month, something, and that gives you Gemini, that gives you everything that Google does, okay? Including a ton, like 2 terabytes worth of space, okay? Google Photos, all that jazz, okay? Now, I'm not here to promote Google. What I'm here to promote, folks, is most of you, I'm going to guess, have not done a procedural manual. And the reason you haven't done a procedural manual is because it's damn hard to put one together. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of tweaking, and it takes a lot of editing, and it takes a lot of this and a lot of that. Folks, look at it this way. Every document, everything, every contract, every procedure, every email, if you want, can go into your company Notebook LM, okay? Your notebook. All of a sudden, that becomes an SOP. Here's the really cool thing. You can share that with your employees, and you don't have to do any organization at all. The problem with Google Sites is it takes a damn lot of work, not just to upload the information, but to organize it. Guess what? Notebook LM solves that problem. You don't have to organize a dang thing, okay? So this morning, okay, just as an example, I went to the Goats of Glacier, and somebody had inquired about a private goat yoga session. I know, it's goofy, but they did. And yes, we teach goat yoga, okay? I couldn't remember how much it costs. I went to my Notebook LM, I typed in how much does it cost for a private goat yoga session, and boom, there was the information right in front of me. I didn't have to look up anything. I didn't have to find the document. I didn't have to do a search bar. I just had to put that sentence into Notebook LM. I could have done it with my voice. I didn't, but I could have, and it would have told me the answer. Here's the other cool thing, and why the audio thing, folks. If you have people that work for you that are not going to read SOPs but would listen to them, hello, you create a podcast, and I've done this with the goat farm. You create a podcast about the farm, about your appraisal business, and you give it to your employees and say, listen to this. And all of a sudden, they have all that information downloaded into their head. And by the way, you can also share it with your employees so they can jump in at any time. And you don't have to share everything, right? If there's some things in Notebook LM you don't want them to see, right? Stuff that would only be for the executive team, you don't have to click on that. You click on the documents you want to share that notebook with them. They can look it up anytime. No more having employees come to you and say, Dustin, what am I supposed to do about this? You can simply say, did you look at Notebook LM? Oh, you didn't? Yeah, look there first. You'll get your answer, and then you don't have to bother me anymore. You're welcome, folks. You're welcome. By the way, if you want to learn more about Notebook LM, speaking of those monthly meetings with the coach, I have one coming up on August 19th. Okay, this is 2025 if you're listening to this in the future. August 19th, 2025, all about how to use Notebook LM for your procedural manuals. It's for the All-Star team only. Okay, you do have to sign up for the All-Star team to be a part of that monthly meeting with the coach on August 19th. Now, 30 days free. If you don't like being a member of the All-Star team, cancel at the end of 30 days. You won't pay a dime. Okay, so it won't cost you anything to come to this webinar. August 19th, 2025, how to use Notebook LM for your procedural manuals. Thank you for joining me today, folks, and go create some value.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit TheAppraiserCoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.